Hi, this is Catherine Moore. I have more to discuss about the Texas Annual Conference administration of the United Methodist Denomination in Houston, Texas. I have another recording of my mother that I'm going to play. This recording is not as long. It's less than 2 minutes long. It's not as long as the other recording I played the last time. And this was Grace Dowden. Grace Dowden was my mother. And my father, John Dowden, had been employed before he went on disability. He had been employed as United Methodist minister of the Texas Annual Conference administration of the United Methodist Denomination in Houston. He passed away in 2012, and my mother passed away in 2018. And here's the recording. Let me...
What was your justification for not letting me out of the apartment, for blocking the door so I could not get out? Why did you do that?
Because I was trying to get you to listen to me.
By blocking the apartment door and not letting me leave the apartment?
Yeah, I blocked you in.
What is your justification for giving me codeine when I was 6 years old? Why'd you do that? When you knew I was making
the doctor
sick.
told me to.
That's a load of shit, too.
Well,
You knew
whatever.
it made me sick. You even went over to the neighbor's house and got strawberry ice cream and put it in the ice cream and fed it to me in the ice cream after I had already threw it up. Why'd you do that? Was it easier to keep me sedated so you didn't have to deal with me?
Yeah.
Is that what was more convenient for you?
Yeah.
Or was it so I wouldn't know that my dad was molesting me? Is that it?
Yeah.
Your sarcasm and your arrogance isn't getting you anywhere.
Bye.
So that was Grace Dowden, and this conversation took place on March 7th of 2017. And in this conversation, I directly asked my mother if she had drugged me so that my father could sexually assault me. My father, who had been employed by the Texas Annual Conference administration in Houston. Now, when this occurred, my father was employed at Northwest Texas Annual Conference of the United Methodist Denomination. And this was just before, I would say a year or two before he became employed under the Texas Annual Conference administration in Houston. And unfortunately, the sexual abuse still continued. They had stopped drugging me. I think that it was because people were beginning to ask questions, because they had been, as I had shared earlier, they had been confronted by medical staff at a hospital in Amarillo because it was suspected that I had been sexually abused based on why they were treating me in the hospital. I'm going to finish reading that letter that Harrison Fisher wrote to Bishop Huey in 2011, and then I have some important things to say about that as well. So the reason why it is significant that my father was employed by the Texas Annual Conference Administration of the United Methodist Denomination in Houston. The significance of that is because my father was not the only United Methodist minister that was employed under their administration that was a child molester. So this was a letter that Harrison Fisher, an attorney, wrote to Bishop Janice Riggle Huey in 2011. This was around a year after I spoke with Bishop Huey in her office, and she offered me absolutely nothing. And Bishop Huey's response to me in that conversation was, "What can we do for you?" And it was interesting that she was asking me for the solution for the lack of discernment that the Texas Annual Conference Administration of the United Methodist Denomination had and has had in employing clergy under their administration. Dear Bishop Huey, this office has been retained by Alicia Provost Graham regarding the above-mentioned incident. There was a news article on the KHOU website, and Alicia Provost Graham is listed as Jane Doe. And he says, she relates the following events upon information and belief that when she was 9 years old, her mother died. She, along with her 7 siblings, was cared for by their maternal grandmother. This is difficult to read because I am dealing with eye fatigue from diabetes. However, I'm going to continue. During this time, the biological father was in prison as a result of a drug conviction. Her grandmother was a member of St. Paul United Methodist Church in Port Arthur, Texas. Miss Provost, along with her other sibling, attended St. Paul with her grandmother. Pastor Kendall Graham was appointed to St. Paul United Methodist Church. He began counseling Miss Provost at approximately the tender age of 10 years old. Pastor Graham became a confidant for her and told her that he and his wife wanted her to come and live with them, and they would adopt her. Pastor Graham was appointed to a church in Huntsville, Texas, where she would go and visit from time to time. Okay. Finally, she agreed to come and live with Pastor Graham and his wife in Huntsville with the happy thought that she would be adopted by a loving family. During her stay in Huntsville, Texas, is when the abuse began. She relates that Pastor Graham began to have sexual intercourse with her at the age of 14. This continued over a period of years, of several years. Pastor Graham divorced Teresa Graham on December 14th of 2007. Kendall Graham, while the pastor of Boynton United Methodist Church and a practicing predator, had unprotected sex with Miss Provost, which results in the birth of their child. He continued to live a life of deception, holding Miss Provost to the church and others as his granddaughter, and their child as their great-granddaughter. Miss Provost relates that she went to various conferences and trips with Pastor Graham, sleeping in a single room. Pastor Graham married Miss Provost on August 11th, 2009 in a ceremony before a justice of the peace in Fort Bend County. Pastor Graham attempted to divorce Provost in Brazoria County, Texas, just recently. This is a horrible story of deception and a flagrant misuse of pastoral authority and influence by a man professing to be called by God. Obviously, this conduct has seriously injured Miss Provost and will continue to be felt through the life of a child whom Pastor Graham has indicated to Miss Provost that he wants to be an active part of their life. It is not Miss Provost's intention or desire to bring grief to the United Methodist Church because of a person who chooses to allow the flesh to have full reign in his life and prey on the innocent for his own sexual gratification. This is a clergy that was employed by the Texas Annual Conference Administration of the United Methodist Denomination in Houston, Texas. The same administration that my father, John Dowden, who was also a child molester, was employed. There is no way Miss Provost can reclaim her virginity or her life, of which a healthy portion has been stolen, altered, and scarred, or the life of her baby girl, who knows what the future will bring. None of the aforementioned can be returned to Miss Provost. Only compensation is the only compensation is monetarily. Therefore, in an effort to resolve this matter at its lowest level, we are authorized to accept $1 million in full settlement of this heinous event. Failure to tender the monies mentioned within 30 of the receipt of this correspondence will result in a lawsuit being filed against Pastor Graham and his employer. Ms. Provost will seek any additional remedies to which she may allow herself entitled. Oh, and we're going to talk about entitlement. I'm going to talk about entitlement and how that is associated with the Texas Annual Conference and their history of employing child molesters. Okay. All communications regarding this matter should be through this office. Do not attempt to contact our client directly. Please find enclosed a copy of this letter for the insurance carrier. Under some policies of insurance, failure to notify them can be grounds for denial. Should you want to discuss this matter further, I can be reached at the above number and address. Sincerely yours, Harrison Fisher. And the client file was Miss Alicia Provost. So, I received a letter, and I have a letter, a similar letter from Bishop Harrison Fisher that he wrote to the Texas Annual Conference, to the conference office to the bishop at the time. And I have been very open about what happened and why I consulted with him. However, the problem with the fact that I was in communication with him, there was a statute of limitations regarding what I went through. I am also going to get to the reason why I am reading this and the retaliation that I went through by the Texas Annual Conference Administration of the United Methodist Denomination in Houston, and also from Harrison Fisher. I have an email that I received from Harrison Fisher after I received this letter. So how did I receive this letter in my paperwork? Well, I'll tell you. It's because Harrison Fisher leaked this letter in my paperwork. The Texas Annual Conference would never pass this letter on to anybody. They're going to keep that under lock and key. And Harrison Fisher was Alicia Provost's attorney that was representing her. And he sent me an email, and in this email, I had a conversation with Alicia Provost. I told her I had this letter. She had an opportunity to retrieve this letter from me. I explained to her how I had this letter in my possession, and that it was Harrison Fisher that leaked this information about her into my paperwork. The same attorney that represented her. And she chose not to get this letter from me. I still have screenshots, and I still have the messages that the conversation that I had with her through Facebook Messenger. I had put it out on Facebook because I did not know who it was. And I wanted to find out who the person was and hopefully share with them what had happened to me. And I was also open to her giving her this letter that was hers. And instead she chose to go back to Harrison Fisher, the attorney who leaked her information in my paperwork. And of course he misspells my name, and he says, this email is to officially notify you you are in violation of Texas law by distributing personal information on Jane Doe without her permission. Okay, so let's talk about Jane Doe. Who is Jane Doe? Jane Doe is Alicia Provost, the girl that I was speaking about. And he said further, she relates that you have been harassing her. She never said that to me. I had not been harassing her. I shared with her, I had this letter, she could have it back, and she will file a police report and seek a restraining order against you. Well, I've never met her in person. I only spoke with her through Facebook Messenger. I've never met her in person. And I was not her attorney representing her. I did not, there was not a responsibility of attorney-client privilege because I, unlike Harrison Fisher, was not her attorney. I am not the attorney that wrote the letter to Bishop Huey, like Harrison Fisher did. I mean, I don't have a college degree. Clearly, I don't have a law degree. So there's no way that I would be intelligent enough or have enough of an organized thought process to compose a letter. I did write a letter to the bishop. I did. And I'm sure that it came across as entitled. And unfortunately, a lot of people do not understand that a desire for justice and closure is not about entitlement. Entitlement is a large United Methodist administration employing clergy and not taking responsibility for being incompetent in their discernment and not understanding the red flags based on the behaviors of their clergy, because these clergy have to go through an extensive process. They have to go through questioning. They have to go before the Board of Ordained Ministry. They are questioned by many people. They have a counseling elder. They have a district superintendent. And yet the Texas Annual Conference has had multiple clergy that were predators. And one of them who was convicted for murder, and that was Michael Tabb. He was sentenced to 55 years in prison. And yes, there were signs. There were signs of abuse that Marla Tabb was showing signs of abuse. And the way that she was portrayed in the media is though she was a difficult person. But it was a domestic violence situation. And anyone who is a victim of domestic violence isn't going to be pleasant because they are in survival mode. And unfortunately, Marla Tabb isn't here to tell her story. But I am. He continues in the email, "You have proven to be a sick and confused person. This is your one and only notice to cease such actions." Well, let's look at this. Okay, mental illness. Okay, mental illness. So basically what Harrison Fisher did, he would gaslight me, and he tried to persuade me to check myself into a psych ward. He attacked my mental health. He also told me that the Texas Annual Conference Administration would also retaliate, and that they would say that I was mentally ill, that I was not fit to take care of our sons. I mean, the same administration that has a history of employing child molesters and placing them on assignment in their churches. They are experts on mental health. Okay, so let's look at this. Mental disorder. Now there's clinical depression, anxiety disorder, bipolar disorder, and there's, dementia, attention, like ADD, schizophrenia, obsessive compulsive disorder, PTSD. I don't see anything in here. Now, I do have a diagnosis of PTSD. I do. But even on the definition of post-traumatic stress disorder, this is just a general definition. And actually what I have, to be more specific, is complex PTSD. And what is that? That is repeated exposure to trauma, which is what I have. That's from going through decades of psychological abuse, spiritual abuse, and sexual abuse from a United Methodist minister that was employed by the Texas Annual Conference Administration of the United Methodist Denomination in Houston, Texas. Now, in these definitions of these mental disorders, which really, this is a small list because there's way more types than this, I don't see anything in here showing Catherine Moore or anything associated with my name, saying my name, and directly addressing as a symptom the fact that I have that letter in my possession that Harrison Fisher wrote to the Texas Annual Conference. However, let's look up one more thing. I'm going to look up attorney-client. Let's see. Attorney-client confidentiality. Oh, and look, would you look at that? Well, you can't see it. Let me pull it. You can't see it. But that is, it's actually a real thing, attorney-client privilege. But it doesn't say anything in here about Catherine's mental health. It does say, though, attorney-client privilege protects the confidentiality of communications between a lawyer and their client, whether oral, written, or electronic. The privilege applies when the communication is made in confidence to seek or give legal advice. It ensures that a client's secrets remain private when seeking legal advice. Well, Alicia Provost received a multi-million-dollar settlement from the Texas Annual Conference. And when it comes to a multi-million-dollar, when it comes to a settlement, a legal settlement, there's usually contracts involved with a commitment to confidentiality. So let's look here. Breach of attorney-client privilege. Violating attorney-client privilege means an attorney discloses confidential information shared by their client without the client's consent. Clearly, Harrison Fisher didn't ask me if he could leak that letter he wrote to Bishop Huey in 2011 about Alicia Provost. I'm pretty sure he didn't ask her if it was okay if he leaked that in my paperwork, because I'm pretty sure she would not have wanted that. But I can see how that would be seen. It would be seen that that is my fault because Harrison Fisher breached attorney-client privilege. Actually, it's really his fault because I didn't go to law school and I've been deemed mentally ill and I'm just not all there. So more than likely, it would be Harrison Fisher that would be responsible for that. And also the Texas Annual Conference, because, I mean, this is what happens when a large administration employs child predators and places them on assignment in their churches, and they groom young girls. And basically, it says information shared by their client without the client's consent, potentially leading to serious consequences. This could include disciplinary action by the bar, legal malpractice lawsuits, and even criminal charges in some cases. The privilege is meant to encourage open communication between clients and their attorneys, and its violation can severely undermine that trust. I also know what happened with, or I know a little bit about the sexual abuse that happened between Alicia Provost and Kendall Graham. And why would I know that? Because Harrison Fisher told me. At the time, I didn't know her name, but he told me. And it was very disturbing and very sick. And understanding attorney-client privilege. So, attorney-client privilege protects confidential communications between a lawyer and their client. Now, let's look up settlement. Let's see, breach of settlement. Let's look up a breach of a settlement contract. A breach of a settlement agreement occurs when one party fails to fulfill the obligations outlined in a legally binding settlement agreement. This can lead to legal consequences and remedies for the non-breaching party. The non-breaching party can sue for breach of contract, seeking damages to compensate for the harm caused by the breach. Enforcement of agreement. The court can order the breaching party to fulfill their obligations under the agreement, either through specific performance or other remedies according to legal websites. And you know what an accomplishment. That I have enough intelligence left and enough of an organized thought process to research this on video and read what a breach of a settlement agreement is and what the consequences are and exactly what attorney-client confidentiality is. And I am not an attorney. I was not obligated to attorney-client privilege. I was not obligated to protect anyone other than our sons and myself, but that was taken from me. I had to visit our sons at St. Stephen's United Methodist Church that was under the Texas Annual Conference Administration of the United Methodist Denomination in Houston, Texas. The same administration that employed Kendall Graham, who sexually assaulted Alicia Provost. The same administration that employed Michael Tabb, who murdered his wife in the early 2000s. The same administration that employed my father, John Chester Dowden, who was a child molester. He was a sexual predator before I was born because his first victim was his sister. And she remained silent despite the fact that she knew what he was capable of. Just like people in the Texas Annual Conference chose to remain silent, especially when I alerted them about one of the visiting parents from the supervised visitation with the Domestic Relations Office showing up with a weapon, and he was allowed to come back. Just like I alerted the Texas Annual Conference Administration of the United Methodist Denomination about how the the fact that the domestic relations office was following parents to the restroom, exploiting parents during these visitations, and the fact that I went through sexual harassment at St. Stephen's United Methodist Church by a visiting parent. Part of that sexual harassment is I had sang a solo for Christmas because I wanted to do it for my sons. I am a trained vocalist. I have an operatic voice, and I was singing "Oh Holy Night." This guy named Shane hugged me, and it was such an uncomfortable environment for me. I hugged him back, but it was not invited. I did not want to hug him. It was disgusting. He smelled. His armpits were sweaty. The staff of St. Stephen's saw it, and they did nothing. Why was it inappropriate? Well, probably because it was not invited. I hugged him under duress because I was uncomfortable. I was afraid to stand up for myself. Why was that? Probably because I was visiting our sons at a United Methodist Church that was under the same administration that employed my father, who sexually abused me most of the time. It wasn't just touching me inappropriately. He also made sexual comments to me. And my father he attended Lake Houston United Methodist Church. They have since separated. But I contacted the conference administration about my father because he would be allowed to hold infants. I tried to let the conference administration know, and I let Lake Houston know, and they did absolutely nothing about it. The reason why he wanted to hold the infants in the church was because he knew how to get away with touching them however he wanted, right in front of everyone. And no one would have thought twice about it. And this is a clergy who had been employed by the Texas Annual Conference Administration of the United Methodist Denomination. And entitlement is the Texas Annual Conference not taking responsibility for their poor discernment in employing clergy who are sexual predators, or clergy who have poor boundaries that want to seek out a friendship with a minor because God only knows something going on inside of them, because they clearly don't have appropriate boundaries and understand that there's nothing appropriate in an adult pursuing a friendship with a minor, especially someone in a leadership role in a church. Grooming doesn't just involve a sexual purpose. Grooming can be an adult pursuing a friendship with a minor in a church setting, a camp, a church event. And I know I am not the only preacher's kid who experienced that. And I know that there were other kids who were also not preachers' kids that also experienced inappropriate relationships within churches under the Texas Annual Conference administration of the United Methodist Denomination. This, I understand it is probably upsetting to people because I read the letter that Harrison Fisher wrote to Bishop Huey in 2011. However, I am not the bishop of the Texas Annual Conference administration of the United Methodist Denomination. I never would have made it that far. I would have had to resign if I had been a clergy because of what happened to me, because it would have not been a safe environment for me to work in. And they would not have wanted me there because they want their victims silent. They don't want their victims empowered. Also, I have strong family connections with the Texas Annual Conference. I was somewhat aware of that, but I did not know that I had ancestral family closely related to Judge Morris Hassel, who served on the conference administration. He was a chairman of the committee for Lakeview United Methodist Camp. He was a chairman of the Board of Trustees at Lon Morris College. And I am related to the Hassel family through my mother. I've always had a joke about the Hassel family, and that joke was that we all lived up to the family name, even if we didn't carry the last name. Judge Morris Hassel is my second cousin, or no, fourth cousin, twice removed, something like that. And I had a great uncle who was a retired district superintendent in the Missouri Conference. And his wife was related to the Hassel family, and even they did not know the history and the fact that the Hassel family had been involved with the United Methodist Denomination even before the Texas Annual Conference was housed in Houston. They had been involved with the conference for a century. I also did more family research, and I found out, because it really helped me understand where my determination came from, because I never did belong in my own family. Because I have told my story, I lost my relationship with the United Methodist Denomination, and a lot of times I had a closer relationship and spent more time with people in the conference administration and other clergy and their families than I did with my own extended family. And people think they know what is going on in your life, even if they're around you, even if they're not around you all the time. And the Hassel family are basically simple country folk. Morris Hassel, Judge Morris Hassel, was not close to the Hassels that I was raised around, and that's mainly because Judge Morris Hassel was raised as an only child, and the Hassels that I was raised around, there were a lot of siblings and it was a large family. As I did more research, I found out that my ancestors it is historically documented that I come from a family who has survived horrific trauma. It was cathartic for me in understanding that because I did not feel so alone. It helped me have a better understanding of where my strength came from and where my determination came from. And that family, the ancestors that I came from, were the Parker family, in reference to the Parker family massacre in Fort Parker. And there is a state park named after them. And I am a descendant of Elder John Parker, and Cynthia Ann Parker is my first cousin 5 times removed. Now, when I see her photo, I see a resemblance of my maternal grandmother, my mother's mother, and I do see a resemblance of my mother, which is interesting because I didn't have access to any photos. I remember photos of my maternal grandmother, but until recently, I didn't have any photos of any other family members that resembled my maternal grandmother. My maternal grandmother was not a nice person. This is what I was told by one of my aunts. She had also had a hard life, and her relationship with her mother was abusive, just like with my mother. And I asked Alice if my mother reminded her of her mother, and she said yes. And I don't know if the rest of the Hassel family knew about the relation to the Parker family, but it made me proud. And I felt like, in a sense, I made Cynthia Ann Parker proud. Because Cynthia Ann Parker should be admired for her strength and her courage. And she handled her trauma with dignity and grace. And she stayed true to herself despite what she had been through. And because of the abuse that I went through with my parents drugging me so that my father could sexually assault me during that time, the effect that had on me was I felt that God hated me. I felt that I was ugly. I felt that I was hideous and that there was just something wrong with me. And after finding out about the history of my ancestors and how they were known nationally and how some of them are known statewide for surviving a massacre, I am proud of the fact that I have been so determined in standing up for myself, and I can guarantee you I am one of the very few people who have had the courage to face the Texas Annual Conference administration of the United Methodist Denomination. And what I will also say is that there is not anyone in that administration or clergy who are qualified to make any assumptions about anyone's mental health, especially if they employed clergy who were responsible for grooming girls and sexually assaulting them, and a clergy who murdered his wife. The things I have seen and experienced are horrific, and it's not only my trauma that I have witnessed other people's trauma. And I do understand that abuse affects all sides, even the family of the perpetrators are affected. And healing begins when you can own what happened to you. And that is what I have done. And I hope that our sons survive the abuse that they are going through. And one thing I know for certain is that our sons will see that I had courage, that I had stamina, that I handled what I went through with dignity and integrity. I am sorry for what happened to Alicia Provost, and I am sorry for the fact that Harrison Fisher betrayed her confidentiality. But I never should have experienced retaliation from the Texas Annual Conference Administration for their mistake in employing people like my father or Kendall Graham. And I never should have experienced retaliation from Harrison Fisher for betraying the confidentiality of his client, Alicia Provost. Harrison Fisher was very familiar with the Texas Annual Conference Administration and had his own history with them, and he never should have represented her. The attorney that would have been more appropriate for Alicia Provost would have been a female attorney, and unfortunately for her, she did not have that knowledge, and unfortunately for me, I didn't have the knowledge that I needed when I met with Bishop Huey in 2011 in her office. Thank you for watching, and that is all I have for this discussion tonight.